Hi, all. I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum. Today is Thursday, August 26th, 2021, and you're watching WGAN TV live at 5. We have an awesome show for you today. Intro to iGuide Radix for insurance and restoration damage estimating. And we have exactly the right subject matter expert on the show today, Chris White, marketing manager of Planetar Inc., which is the company behind iGuide. Chris, thanks again for being on today's show. And just you've been on WGAN TV live at 5 a number of times, and it's good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I like being here. It's great.
Awesome. Let's start out with iGuide Radix. Who's this for?
Excellent question. So iGuide Radix is intended specifically for the insurance, restoration, and construction industry. So that's different than what we normally do. So iGuide is typically targeted at something like residential real estate or commercial real estate, or a more marketing focused type of application or audience. So,
all right, so this is exciting. This is
new. It's all new for us. It's very cool.
So help me understand. Insurance, restoration. What are the typical titles of a kind of person that would be super interested in iGuide Radix?
Appraiser, estimator, contractor, anyone who's involved in the process of creating a claim, or in the process, involved in the process of remediation, or so estimating a loss, going to a property and looking at what's occurred and documenting that, or someone who's involved in the cleanup.
If I have a fire or flood in the house, wind damage,
exactly,
whatever it might be, if somebody is involved in, I think what I heard was remediation, remodeling, renovation, adjusting, insurance adjusting, and that insurance adjuster may perhaps represent the insurance company, or it might be an insurance agent that either I, as an individual homeowner, or maybe more likely a business owner, wanting to have a separate insurance claim, representing my interests, perhaps, versus the insurance company that's settling my claim.
Yeah, so there are a lot of people involved in the process of creating a claim and then managing that claim through its life cycle, I guess you could call it. And all those people would be interested in the data. Not all those people are interested in actually capturing that data. That's very specifically tied to using the camera and going on site. So some people don't go on site. They sit remotely and do something else.
So we'll talk about that. So iGuide Radix, we kind of understand now who it's for. What's the benefits? What does iGuide Radix actually do?
That's an excellent question. So iGuide Radix allows you to see a property remotely, right? Just like photos. And that's not new. That's been around for quite some time. The difference is that it allows you to measure that property as well, and also see the visuals. And so that's critical for the process of determining required materials to rebuild after a loss, because you need to measure how much literally how much wall there is, and then calculate the materials involved, like studs and framing and drywall and all that stuff.
So Chris, I'm actually having trouble getting my head around this. I think this might be one of those cases where it just helps to see what the deliverables are, not even how it's captured or created, but what is it that an insurance adjuster, someone in renovation, restoration, anyone involved in an insurance claim, what's the deliverables that they actually get?
Good question. Why don't I share my screen and show you? Did that work? Can you see my screen?
I did. And I'm going to point out for those that want to follow that we are on your website, goiguide.com, goiguide.com.
Yes.
And I believe you actually got here by going to that blue tab and then you pulled down to get to insurance restoration. Okay,
Correct.
great. So
That's
anyone
right.
that wants to come back to this page will know how to get there.
You got it. So for anyone who doesn't know what an iGuide is, I'll just kind of go down here and preface Radix by saying an iGuide is a combination of a floor plan, an accurate floor plan, and 360-degree visuals. So Radix is similar but different. It does not involve the drafting of a floor plan, which has advantages and disadvantages, which we can get to later. But why don't I show you a Radix and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
So let's go all the way down here. Have a look at this. All right. So what I want you to notice is that hopefully you can see this. There are some visuals, and I can navigate those visuals by clicking and dragging my mouse and looking around. But then on the left here, I've got these mysterious squiggly lines. Oops. Let's do that again. Sorry about that. So these are point cloud data or laser data. And these can be measured upon. So again, Radix is a combination of 360-degree images and measurements, or literally LiDAR point cloud data. If you're familiar with point cloud data, sorry.
The iGuide Planix camera kit that you use to capture this data, the camera kit actually includes LiDAR, LiDAR, which is considered a super accurate way of capturing depth data for space. Okay, great. You got your camera with you today.
There it is. That's LiDAR. Yeah.
The iGuide Planix camera kit. So, but if I'm an insurance adjuster, I'm probably working in the world of Xactimate.
Correct.
So this is interesting, and I guess I could do measurements here. I see a little ruler in the bottom left, so I could take measurements in this entire space. But can you help me get to Xactimate?
Sure. So I'll walk you through the process. What one would do if one wants to get from on-site to Xactimate is you would go out on-site with a camera, usually this one, and you would capture data. If you look over here, everywhere you see a dot, that represents a scan position where the camera was placed and a button was pushed. And then what you would do is you would take that data and you would send it in for publishing to be turned into a Radix, which is what you see here. And when you've done that, you can then, with access to this tour, click on the little ruler button, just as you had said, and then measure anything you want on the floor plan. So I hope you guys can see this. I'm just clicking and dragging and drawing a line. So that's just one form of measurement. There are others, but the simplest form is right here. And then what I can do from here is I can take that thing you see right there on screen and I can download it as a JPEG. So here's the magic of Radix, and it's part of the value proposition. So Radix is fast. You can go out and scan a property like this in minutes. Like, it doesn't take very long to shoot a few scans. Most claims, from my understanding, are relatively small. They're like a few rooms and an entryway or a hallway or something like that. So you can go out and shoot that. You can then take that data, you can turn it into this, what you see on screen right here. You can measure on it and then save it out as a JPEG. So what Xactimate allows you to do is pull any JPEG you want into the software and then draw on it. So what you're really doing is you're drawing a very small floor plan, essentially. And then I'm in all likelihood, people who are using Xactimate are already familiar, but if anyone's listening and they don't know how Xactimate works, basically Xactimate is software for estimating. And when you draw on it and create a floor plan or a sketch is what they call it. It's going to allow you to estimate the cost of materials. Yep.
I'm sorry, Chris.
Oh yeah, no worries.
I was thinking that for Xactimate, though, that you would take the point cloud data that the camera is collecting and begin with the point cloud data, or am I beginning with a sketch?
Right. So imagine it like this. You're going to take this point cloud data that you see right here on screen. Hopefully this works. So what I've done is I've downloaded the point cloud data right here as a JPEG. So from that online interface.
I'm sorry, I can't see it on the screen. Maybe
because I'm in a separate window here. Hold on. Let me switch windows.
Okay.
Where is it? Oh, technology. There we go. Yes. Okay. Hold on. New share. Can you see it? Yeah, there we go. Okay. Check this out. There we go. So that is point cloud data. So what you can do is anything you want on that point cloud data. Hopefully you can see my screen, right?
I can. I see a
Okay.
measurement of 16.5.
Yeah. So there's a very good reason why I put that seemingly random measurement there. In order to use this data, you have to set scale in your software. So you need to tell the software essentially how big something is so that it knows the relative sizes of everything else. If you're familiar with Xactimate, you already know what I'm talking about. Basically, you load it into Xactimate or Symbility or whatever software you're using. You then set the scale on that line. I just randomly drew a line. So normally you'd probably make it a little simpler, like 10 feet. I made it 16.5 for no reason.
So I bring my laser measure with me and I take a couple of key measurements so that we can make sure that the scale is correct.
You don't even need to do that. So you can set scale from that line you drew. So, so it's even easier. On Xactimate, it's just click and drag on top of that line, tell it it's 16 foot 5 inches, you're done. And then what you can do is start drawing on top of the laser data if you wish. This makes sense if you are going to draw something, relatively small, if you're going to do something like 3 rooms in a hallway or whatever. Larger projects require a lot more work to draw, because they're bigger, and you can certainly do those using Radix, but that's not what most claims are. So this was really designed for insurance and restoration professionals, not for marketing, for estimating losses and for bringing that to Xactimate and making the claims process faster, significantly faster.
So I think what I'm actually seeing and hearing are 2 things. I'm an insurance adjuster. I'm a remediation, renovation, remodeling person, whatever it is. I got an insurance claim I need to do. I have 2 ways of getting it into Xactimate. I can either take the sketch that's on the left side and trace on top of that, or I can export the point cloud, which is a DXF, David X-ray Frank, DXF file that can be imported into CAD. I don't think it can be imported directly into Xactimate, so maybe you could take us through how I do that.
So what I'll do is I will share with you a DXF that I have preloaded up like a pro.
Okay.
Can you see that?
I can.
There you go. Okay, so the DXF, it looks very similar. It's point cloud data. One thing to note, though, in case anyone's curious, this question will probably come up later on your forum. The DXF is providing point cloud data in 2D. So, and this is critical to know. This is not a 3D point cloud. It's not like an XYZ file where you've got, height data. There is data there to measure in 3-dimensional space on the viewer, but this particular file only has 2D point cloud data. So there's no way to turn this into like a 3D model, not without estimating the heights of the ceilings and converting it into a 3D model from a sketch. But you can see the point cloud data, you can zoom in, you can do whatever you want. To be honest, the DXF is useful, but it's honestly, it's slower than using the viewer. It's faster to go to the viewer, zoom in on what you want. Again, like a smaller claim, something like 3 rooms in a hallway, capturing out that JPEG and just loading it into Xactimate. Like it takes about a minute. So it's probably faster to do it. But people like the DXF. They use it for CAD.
Let's say I'd like to use the DXF file, and I'd like to end up in Xactimate. How do I do that?
So if you were going to do that, now I'm not an expert on Xactimate by any stretch, not even close. I got like a free trial, but you can convert a DXF into anything you like. So the DX, so the scale is automatically set for the DXF. When you load it up, it just already knows. It's like magic. So you'd have to draw a scale of some sort, like a bar or whatever. And then you'd have to export it as a JPEG, and then you'd have to bring it. It's exactly the same. You turn it into something that Xactimate can see, which is usually a JPEG or I think maybe a PNG. And then you'd load it up in exactly the same way.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the maybe before we get too much into the actual features of iGuide Radix, is to talk about the benefits of there's old school in terms of how adjusters used to do this. So let's assume that was, I'm going out to do an insurance claim, and I should probably say my wife and I have been lucky enough that we've actually had three different unrelated floods in our house. So I've actually seen old school process come in and see them take 1,000 pictures and a bazillion measurements, and then to actually begin this Xactimate process either on site or back at the ranch.
So the Radix and an iGuide as well have the benefit of being very comprehensive forms of documenting a loss. So because you're creating 360s, you can look up and down and left and right. You can see the ceiling and the floor. So it's my understanding, talking to people in the industry, that you never know what you're going to need until you need it. So that means capturing more data is almost always better, which is fine. That's totally compatible with the way these camera systems work. You can go into a space and capture just an absolute ton of data, and it doesn't really cost you all that much time. It's pretty fast. The benefit here is that if you're comparing this to something like pencil and paper and photos,
yes,
the difference is massive. Like, I mean, just the measurement aspect alone. So I always tell this story. I've probably told it on multiple, we get around to live at fives, but basically I used to do HVAC calculations. So I'd go to houses and I'd manually measure them, and one of the funniest things that used to happen to me just constantly is that I would go to a property, I would measure it out, and then on my drive home, I'd be like thinking about it, and I'd be like, did I measure that wall right? And remember, all I have to go on is paper. Like I draw boxes, I'm putting measurements on them. I measured with a laser measuring or tape measure, trundle wheel or whatever. So with this, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff because you're documenting a space with the fancy LiDAR and it's all digital. You just have all the data. You can just measure on it later. You never have to worry that you're going to make a mistake. Human error is essentially eliminated. The only error you could make would be to not capture enough. That almost never happens because, you go all the way on the job site, and because it's so easy to capture the data, you tend to always capture more.
I guess the way I would describe that benefit, because again, having lived through 3 different floods, it meant that the general contractor would call from time to time and say, hey, could we come back and take some more pictures because the insurance company needs to see some picture that they didn't previously take.
Yes. Well, okay. You've hit on one of the benefits. That's reduce costs because you don't have to have as many site visits. So no one in any industry ever wants to make multiple trips to a property unless it was a really nice house, or the people were very nice. I don't know. But basically, that time is money. So that travel time is expensive. Time on site is expensive. And if you're, example, someone who's running a business, you're paying someone to go to this site and to gather that data, and you don't want to have to do it multiple times. So that's a huge part of this, is that you can measure after the fact. You can look at the images whenever you want. You'll be able to see things that you wouldn't necessarily have specifically taken a photo of, because the 360s are so flexible and you can look wherever you like.
And I'm hearing it's really 2 things that you're collecting. One is you're obviously collecting the photography through the 360 spherical photography that the iGuide Planix camera kit captures. But second, and probably super important for those in insurance claim estimating, you're actually collecting all the data, and that data equals measurements.
That's
so
exactly right. Yeah.
After the fact, you can measure.
That's right. Yeah. So
and again, going back to our floods in our house, that our general contractor inevitably would have to come back and remeasure something. It wasn't just as simple as the wall. They actually needed to know, because our house has double high ceilings and a loft type thing. They needed
Was it
to
3
know,
floods in the same house?
Three floods, totally unrelated. So we've been through this process, and totally old school, meaning our general contractor, super, we'd highly recommend them. But, other than voicemail and texting, that was the extent of technology. So he would
Yep.
really come out with his phone and take a bazillion pictures, and he would measure. Maybe he had a digital measurer, but not much more. So anyway, so that meant that there'd be a key measurement, that there'd be a discussion between the insurance company and the general contractor in order to document, well, exactly how many feet of materials that is, and there's a dispute. So they'd actually come back out and remeasure something and probably take yet another picture of it in order to answer the insurance company's question. So I think what I'm hearing from you is, no, you've eliminated all those return trips because you already have all the pictures, you have all the data. And I'm guessing I actually mentioned something that's probably another benefit, is you're reducing disputes because you actually have
absolutely
photos and data that the insurance company, the general contractor, that everyone can agree on. That's kind of the moment of truth.
Absolutely. So there's another benefit associated with that. That's sort of interesting. So what this does is this separates the process, or can separate the process. So the person on site collecting the data doesn't have to be the person actually doing the claim. So, everything's digital. This stuff is easily shareable online. That means that someone can capture all this data and then send it to someone for remote estimating. So that speeds it up even more. So, I mean, you can imagine the old school way would be, you take notes, you take photos, and then you go somewhere and you work with that data and you draw sketches. You don't have to do that anymore. You can just capture the data, send it to somebody, and then they can do the claim, and you can go capture data somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that actually probably speaks to a couple other benefits, which is the person that collects the data, taking the pictures, collecting the data, actually is probably somebody that gets paid less than the person who's actually the claims adjuster, that has all these years of experience with Xactimate and can tease out the 50 different things. I mean, it's actually very interesting. I think, well, I'm looking at a wall and the drywall's removed, and no, they're looking at, okay, well, there's the molding, there's the carpet. Oh, that carpet, you got carpet that runs the entire length of your basement. So that carpet, we can't just replace a piece of carpet. We have to replace the entire carpet, the crown molding, the drywall. There was damage behind the drywall. There's insulation. So that person no longer really needs to come out, and all this data can be collected, all the photography can be collected. So the more expensive person could probably be more efficient back in the office.
There are lots of different business models all across North America. So that doesn't work in some places, but it does in others. But you're right. Someone can go out and capture the data, and then a completely separate person can do the actual claims process or the estimating.
Okay.
So what that means is it reduced travel time. Sorry, what was that?
I'm trying to see if we've teased out all the benefits of iGuide Radix. So we talked about saving time, cutting cost, reducing visits, which is saving time and essentially saving money, getting accurate data. Who owns the data?
So if you captured it, you own it. You can download it and keep it for as long as you like. That means that you don't have to pay any subscription fees. There are no subscription fees. It's basically a pay per use model. So you're going to pay per project is what we call it.
So if I need to save this project for 7 years for tax purposes or something else, I'm not paying a monthly recurring charge. It's a one-time project fee associated with that particular claim.
You got it. It's actually even a little bit weirder than that. There's it's not a hidden feature, but it's a new and unique feature that has the benefit of extra flexibility. So with a Radix, and I'm not aware that any other platform will allow you to do this. You can correct me if I'm wrong if you know, but with a Radix, what you can do is you can go out, use the camera, capture a site, then for whatever reason, go back out to the site, recapture more data, and then you can add it to the existing Radix for just a small add-on fee. It's just a little bit extra. It's not like you have to pay for a whole new processing or any
What
of that
would be
stuff.
the use case for doing that?
Right, it's a good question. So let's suppose that a site visit, multiple site visits are necessary for some weird reason. So there's lots of reasons, actually. They're not that weird. So let's suppose that you go out on site and communication wasn't so great and remediation team wasn't there yet. Whatever was supposed to be there that you're supposed to document, showing equipment. So, okay, you document the site, you get the data to whoever needs it, and you have to go back the next day, and then all the blower fans are set up because, there's water damage, they got to dry it out. Okay, then you document it again. You don't get dinged twice, you just get dinged for what you add. Or this one's even more fun, and I wish this existed a few years ago because it would have been great. You've got a really big project, so it's a really big property, but it's not all available to you at once. So
Yes.
you go out day one, you have access to this area.
Yes.
And then you go out day two and you have access to another area. And day three, another area. You can just keep adding data on, but you don't have to hold on to it. You can publish it as you go.
Yes, which is terrific because I actually do recall in our dining room, the wall didn't get opened up on the first get-go. And then the general contractor came out after the remediation people were there, and he says, we've just put a, moisture tester device to the wall. It's amazing. They can tell you how much moisture is on a wall and go, you still have problems with this wall. This wall has to come out. So that meant the insurance company adjuster that came out didn't measure and do his Xactimate for that particular dining room wall. So there were people, the insurance adjuster had to come back. I don't remember who took out the wall, but the wall had to come out. So that I guess that speaks to what you were describing, is the data collection was on multiple days because it wasn't all uncovered in that first pass.
In the real world, that's quite common to have something like that happen where you have to make multiple visits. It's not ideal. No one wants to do that. But,
okay.
So that certainly does happen.
Before we kind of jump into the features of the iGuide Radix solution, are there kind of other benefits that we haven't discussed, or maybe we'll tease them out as we go through some of the features?
Yeah, I guess we'll just naturally segue into the features by talking about the biggest one, the most compelling and interesting one. So cutting costs, reducing time on site is all intended to imply that the claims process moves faster. Yes. So in order to get the claim resolved or get the process moving, get it finished, you want to be able to get the data to move from one person to the next as quickly as possible. So one of the really interesting features that's available for Radix is the ability to upload from on-site. So what you can do is you can take your Planix camera and you can scan a job site, document a loss, and then you can take that data and right from your phone or your tablet, you can send it in for publishing. And it's not instant because it has to be sent through your cellular connection, whatever that may be. But, relatively speaking, it's almost instantaneous that when you send it, you're going to have instant access to that data, or someone else will. So that remote estimating, is relevant there, right? So if someone else is sitting at a desk waiting for that data, well, they're going to get it because you can send it to them right from the property, which is quite cool.
So if you happen to be in the boonies and you're 2 hours away from the office, but that person who actually does the adjusting or kind of writing up the insurance claim, they could get going, or even before you've left the site, they could be reviewing it to just say, I didn't see any pictures outside. I know there wasn't any fire or flood.
That's right. You got it.
It was outside, but for whatever reason, I need to understand the structure from the outside, because if we're replacing something, I got to know what those outside walls are.
That's right. So I haven't personally seen that occur yet. We will eventually, though. It just makes sense that you would be on site, you would capture data, you would send it in, and then someone would ask for revisions. Like, can you go out and get the shed? And you say, okay, sure. You're right. You're totally right.
Could you take us back to your website for and show where you have your different examples? That it's we're going to go to goiguide.com/ insurance-restoration. Again, you can get there from the menu. So I think there were some examples that you had. If you could, there were some multiple examples on this page.
Oh, down here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oops, there we go.
Yep,
Yeah.
there we go. So I noticed that you had, there were two examples of fire and two
Yeah.
examples of flood. Yeah, maybe just open maybe one of those fire ones because it is a bit crazy to see all this. So
Oh yeah, it's wild. Well, this is a great example of a small like claim. So one of the benefits of this is that it's a small benefit, but it's relevant, is that you don't need to capture everything to use Radix. You can just capture whatever you want. Like it's very, very affordable. We haven't talked about price yet, which is another benefit. But if you really just want to capture, a few rooms, go right ahead. There's nothing wrong with that. The spookier, the better. Look at this place.
yeah, okay, crazy. So, and then for those that are interested in that DXF file, I believe on your website, on goiguide.com, there's an example that can be downloaded. Could you just show us where to find that file for those that are interested in downloading that file?
I'm just going to go up here. I'm going to click on learn more. So if you want to know more about the process of using the camera, there is a quick video when you click on this button. That's hopefully available. There you go. That's me. Look at that handsome guy.
Yeah.
And that shows the process. But if you scroll down a bit, there's a link right here. You can download the DXF
okay,
and play with it
great.
if you like.
So that's where you can download the file. So that's cool. So I think it might be helpful to just talk a little bit more about the specific features of the iGuide Radix. So for example, I think the first feature that sticks in my mind is speed of uploading. You can do that right from the field. I'm guessing the file is not so huge that you can't use your cellular data plan.
Oh, you got it. Okay, so I'm going to make a bold claim here. This is pretty serious stuff. I think the Planix camera combined with the iGuide Radix is the absolute fastest way to get data to an estimator for that process. Like I can't think of a faster way. But there's a really good reason for that. And this is why I'm confident enough to say that it's the fastest. So the way iGuide works is a little bit different than maybe other competing systems. What happens is that, you capture 360s and you capture LiDAR measurement. And those 360s are essentially the absolute minimum amount of data you need to document a space. So we're not talking about the quantity of 360s. We're just talking about the 360s and LiDAR point cloud data itself. It means it's very lightweight. Like it's not an enormous amount of data. Like an entire property might be a few hundred megabytes, So what that means is it's actually viable to send that data from your phone to someone remote. It's not as though it's gigabytes worth of data and it would crush your phone. And that's especially true with a smaller claim, like 2 or 3 rooms, maybe 10, 15 scans. So, when I'm thinking about other systems and the way they work, they tend to have a much larger amount of data. So you still could upload them remotely, but it would just take a lot longer. And there's also zero processing time. Oh, sorry.
That's good. I'll ask you about another system in a moment, but I think before we do that, maybe you could go back to the iGuide website, goiguide.com,
Sure.
And you have a chart that shows the difference between a iGuide Radix and what I think of as an iGuide, a standard and premium. So could you walk us through this chart?
Absolutely. So it's important to know that an iGuide Radix and a regular iGuide or an iGuide standard, iGuide premium, they're all made from the same thing. So an interesting side effect of them all being made from the same data is that if you capture data for an iGuide Radix and then decide you want a professionally drawn floor plan, just order an iGuide. You can just make one if you like. So that means that a lot of people could start with a Radix, use it for whatever they want. And then later, if they need during that claims process to have a full blown floor plan that looks nice and it's accurate, they don't have to draw it themselves. It's not like you're stuck. You can just order an iGuide and have that made. So the biggest difference between Radix, an iGuide standard, and an iGuide premium is that Radix does not have a floor plan. So there's no floor plan drawn. So there's a benefit to that in that there's no time required to draw a floor plan. So that means you get the data instantly, which is awesome. iGuide is
the assumption here too is that someone who's doing insurance claim adjusting, they're working in their own software. So really all they need is a either a floor plan view or the DXF file in order to bring it into CAD or whatever they're going to do with that file.
It's interesting. Typically, they're going to take the data during the estimating process, and they're going to sketch and basically draw a floor plan off of it. So they don't really need a floor plan, but sometimes they do. So it's nice to have the option.
So there's two things that stand out that Radix has that the iGuide Standard and iGuide Premium does not have. The first is the LiDAR point cloud. That's the DXF file. And second is on-site upload.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So Radix has an advantage over Standard and Premium in the sense that it's faster. It's just straight up faster. It's significantly less expensive. I'll say that.
And then the other features that you also get with the iGuide Radix include, I see 4 other checkboxes.
Yeah, so it's more, so an iGuide has floor plans, room dimensions, square footage totals, all that stuff. None of that stuff is in Radix because the data is not being interpreted. It's not being drawn by a drafter. But all the other stuff, you still get it. You on-screen measurements. So if you want to measure ceiling heights, you can do that. If you want to measure floor areas, all this stuff is usually really important for measuring surfaces for estimating. If you want to download it and use it, self-host it somewhere on your website, you can do that just like a regular iGuide. It's really that drafted information that you're not going to get. You're not going to get a drafted floor plan in SVG or PDF. Interesting fun fact. If you order an iGuide, you still do get the point cloud because you get a DXF with the point cloud in it. So if you decided that you did want a floor plan and you don't feel like getting a Radix and you still want the point cloud, well, you would also get that with an iGuide as well.
Okay. So Matterport TruePlan versus iGuide Radix.
Okay, it's a good question. So just before we started talking, I went and I looked at the Matterport's website, and TruePlan is very cool. I'll say that. But I think it's, I would say, overkill for most projects that are out there based on what people are telling us in the industry. So, and that's why Radix exists. It's meant to be a very specific solution to a very specific problem. How to get data, like good quality, accurate measurements and visuals from one person to another to make that estimating claims process, documenting a loss fast. So the TruePlan is very, very expensive relative to the cost of measuring it yourself, which is like nothing. So it's kind of like you want something in the middle. You don't want to do it by hand because it's prone to human error and it's time consuming and it's not fun. But you don't necessarily need like a full 3D point cloud with the data already drawn in Xactimate. Like it's like 3 rooms in a hallway. That's like overkill. So, what's in the middle? Well, Radix is right in the middle. It's perfect because and that's not to say that the TruePlan doesn't have its place. It totally does because it has 3-dimensional data that may be required for some 3D modeling. But if your goal is to document that loss in a comprehensive way with 360-degree visuals and measurements that you can use to sketch in something like Xactimate or Symbility, then Radix is like exactly what you need and nothing more. So that means it's extremely cost-effective and fast. Whereas TruePlan is a little bit more expensive, well, significantly more expensive, depending on what you're doing. And it also may take longer, obviously. The capture process, I'm not an expert on Matterport's capture process, but it is totally different. I mean, it's similar, but it's different. And then obviously moving that data around is also different. And then using that data is different. So they're not apples to apples, but there's benefits to the Radix in the sense that it's significantly cheaper, it's significantly faster, and it's my understanding that it's also significantly easier to use, but that's debatable because it kind of depends on your skill level. Oh, I can't hear you. Are you muted? Oh yeah, yours says you're muted.
Thank you.
Sorry.
When I think of Matterport True Plan, which is really essentially an Xactimate, that's what you're getting.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're getting a sketch for Xactimate. So that's another key difference. That's a good point. You don't
so
have
the,
to draw it yourself.
so
They'll do
the
it for
really
you.
the question is, if you're the insurance adjuster and you want to do your own Xactimate, then you don't need Matterport True Plan.
So
If
no, you don't.
you're an adjuster and you want to replace doing the Xactimate, then Matterport will do it for you.
Yeah.
That may take some time to get it turned around. So there may be, I would say maybe 3 questions is, does the job warrant the expense for a Matterport True Plan, a Matterport True Plan? 2, does the time that it takes to get the True Plan, is that okay? Because it may be a couple days to get it.
Yeah, it's my understanding it's 24 to 48 hours, but
And things typically happen pretty fast in this insurance adjusting space. So that's can you wait the 1, 2, 3 days to get the Xactimate? So 1 is cost, 2 is how long it takes. 3, I don't know the answer to this question, but Matterport uses structured light to capture depth data, and iGuide Radix, using the iGuide Planix camera kit, uses LiDAR, which is considered more accurate. So that may be a factor too. It may not matter if you've had fire damage that's limited to a kitchen and a bedroom above the kitchen. But if you're doing a super large space, you may be off by inches with structured light. Maybe you need to do the laser measure anyway to adjust both for Matterport, so that you actually make the model to the exact size. So that's probably how if I was doing Xactimate or Matterport True Plan, I'd probably send in some key measurements to make sure that it was scaled properly, or scale it when I got it back. I think the third difference was, and maybe this still goes back to speed, is you're on site with the iGuide Planix camera kit capturing the imagery and the data, and therefore you can instantly upload it from the field to create an iGuide Radix, versus perhaps the Matterport data may be somewhat of a larger file and may not be as practical in terms of trying to transmit it from the field.
Yeah, no, you're right. So there's another interesting difference here in that Matterport's True Plan essentially is drawing you something. I can't remember the file extension. It's for Xactimate. It's like SK something or other. So Radix doesn't give you that, but that doesn't mean, it still doesn't mean you have to draw it yourself. If you wanted to, you can turn over the DXF and the Radix tour to a third party, and they can just draw a sketch for you in Xactimate. So if that's the barrier,
Yes.
that's not really a barrier.
Yeah. I guess the only other question I would ask about Matterport True Plan versus iGuide Radix is, I'm hearing that you typically are going with Radix is you're going to do a sketch over that floor plan view. Frankly, you can do that with the Matterport floor plan view. So is there any advantage of using Radix to do this tracing versus Matterport? Is it simply that it's the speed of getting the file back to the adjuster? Is that
exactly? Well, it's speed and cost. It's going to be cheaper to do a Radix in most cases because it's pay once, and then you can share the data as much as you like.
Okay, you own the data. So I think if you're watching this show and you're trying to make a decision between Matterport True Plan, iGuide, Radix, I think what I would say is ask your Matterport salesperson who owns the data, because that actually may matter to you. And that, in my mind, is still a gray area that Matterport's never resolved properly, is what they're doing with the data when it's captured, because they're obviously doing something with the data in order to create super large data sets. That's a different topic. I think it's probably helpful to point out, you and I did a show back in March, iGuide Planix Camera Kit, intro, demo, and frequently asked questions. So we haven't spent a whole lot of time trying to understand the iGuide Planix Camera Kit and the deliverables in terms of the iGuide. So I think it would be helpful just to refer our viewers to say, if you feel like you haven't gotten what you're looking for in today's show, it's by choice. We really wanted to assume a prerequisite that you probably have watched iGuide Planix Camera Kit, intro, demo, and FAQs for the WGAN TV show that aired March 18th, 2021. And we did yet another show, iGuide Stitch post-production software training, back on July 1, 2021. So those two shows are available in the We Get Around Network forum, WGANforum.com. Look for the tag box, just click on tag, and you can search by either iGuide or iGuide Planix or iGuide Radix or iGuide Stitch or iGuide. So there's a ton of content about iGuide in the We Get Around Network forum. So what is it that we haven't talked about in terms of iGuide Radix? We've talked about benefits, we've talked about features, we've talked about how iGuide Radix compares to Matterport TruePlan. What else do you feel we should cover about iGuide Radix?
Yeah, we used to go to trade shows. People would always ask the same thing. What is it? Why should I want it? And how much does it cost? We didn't talk about costs yet. So it's very, very simple.
Let me ask that question. I haven't asked that question.
Okay, fire away.
Chris, iGuide Radix, how much does it cost?
Oh, thanks for asking. Let me tell you. So basically, it's not the same model as iGuide, sorry. So it's not by square footage. And so this is different for us. It's out of our comfort zone. We typically, everything's about square footage for iGuide. If you've already seen iGuide stuff, you'll know this. But if you haven't seen it before, it's all about square footage because the focus of iGuide is about measurement. But in this scenario, we don't know the square footage. So that can't be used to determine the processing fees. So there is a cost associated with Radix that is for processing the data. And you pay that after you submit it for publishing. So involved in that fee is hosting, publishing, and you get access to all the deliverables for that processing fee. So that fee can be broken down per scan. And in United States dollars, it is 75 cents a scan with a minimum fee of $15. So that means that for most claims, so that's, I forget how many scans is it, $15? That's 75 cents, 20? Let's check. I think so. I don't have a calculator.
Hey Siri, $15 divided by 75 cents.
Yeah, who will get to it first?
I found an answer. It's displayed on your iPhone.
20.
It's 20. I did a calculator as well.
I don't think. I always defer to Siri. So I think it might be helpful because unlike our previous shows where we're typically talking to real estate photographers, and if we say scan, they understand that means a 360 degree spherical image. So for the benefit of those in insurance, restoration professionals, anybody involved in this process of estimating for insurance claims, it's a scan. I might have in a previous life said a rotation of the camera, but actually the camera doesn't rotate.
Ancient history.
Yeah.
So a scan, I'll define it in a sort of general way, is when you use this camera system to measure in 360 degrees and photograph at the same time. The magic of this camera is that it doesn't just measure with the LiDAR and take a picture. It does both those things, but it combines that data so that the measurements are connected to the visuals. And that's how you can measure on screen. Either way, a scan means that you take the camera, you put it somewhere, you push a button on your smartphone, you wait 10 seconds, you're done. That's it. Super easy.
So I think in the latter part, you defined it. The camera sitting on a tripod, every time you press the button, it is 75 cents
Yeah,
with a
pretty much,
minimum
yeah.
of $15 US.
So, that's the minimum. So that covers almost all claims, right? About $15. So that means you can go to a property, shoot 20 scans, which is a lot. Like typically, so I would say minimum you need one per space, right? Just to see everything. But that's not how this works, right? Like you want to be documenting things like typically in a flood, they're going to have, damage up from the floor, a couple feet, right? So you'd lower the camera down, and you can put the camera wherever you want, if you didn't know that. And you can put it near the damage, and then you can just scan. You can place the camera wherever you like. You have full creative control, if you will, about where the camera goes. So you could do 20 scans, but it's not prohibitive to do 25. It's not like there's a huge price jump. It's just 75 cents for every scan. So you kind of do what it is you're going to do. That can be, I'll be honest with you, that can be a bit challenging to estimate in terms of cost. So you have to get familiar with the system and get a few properties under your belt before you can just ballpark how much it's going to cost you for a property. So what I mean by that is it's difficult for someone who's never done this before to look at a property and go, oh, that's about 50 scans, and then do the math, right? But that comes, like, it's not that hard to figure out.
And I think it's still probably a little bit hard because you could look at, our flood in the house, and you go, okay, well, that just really requires a few scans in the dining room. And then you showed us pictures of a fire, and I could imagine you'd really want to, I was going to say fire, but you're really going to want to shoot off a lot of images at various heights and places in order to incredibly document every aspect of that.
That's usually the way it goes. Like it's usually like overkill because you never know what you're going to need until you need it. So rather than hold back and be very sparse, people usually go kind of nuts and shoot a ton. But that makes sense. If you've got something like an electrical panel, you might put the camera right up to it so you can capture that in great detail, or you might put the camera over near a damaged appliance or heating appliance type thing.
So you've given us the cost for iGuide Radix. You did briefly mention iGuide Standard, iGuide Deluxe,
Premium, yeah.
Premium. Do you want to just take us through those costs quickly?
Yeah, sure. So iGuide Standard and Premium mean that rather than just submit the data and then just get access to it and share it, the data is going to be interpreted and floor plans are going to be drawn, and that gets you floor plans, total square footages, room dimensions, all that stuff. And that's, if you don't know, that's if your listeners don't know, that's typically used for marketing purposes. It doesn't have to be, but that's typically what it's used for. So that means for a real estate transaction, it's very important to input that data, into a listing page so that people know how big a house is before they buy it. So you get that with an iGuide Standard or iGuide Premium. Before I get into the prices though, basically the difference between a standard iGuide and a premium iGuide is just the detail on the floor plans. So standard iGuides have no fixtures or appliances. They're very much like a bare floor plan, whereas a premium floor plan has toilets and sinks and bathtubs and appliances and all that stuff. So if that's important to you, then that's going to cost a little bit more. But that cost is directly related to the fact that a professional draftsperson has to look at the data and say, oh, there's a toilet, and then put it in. Like it's not automated. That you're paying for someone to actually use their eyeballs, which is kind of cool. So the actual cost for iGuides is a little bit complicated in the sense that it goes by square footage. So our website has a calculator. So I'll just give you a ballpark number, but about up to 1,500-ish square feet, it's going to be around $30. To be precise, it's $29 for 450 square feet. Sorry, for 1,450. And then a premium iGuide costs $43.50. So up to 1,450 square feet. Either way, very few people actually think about the square footage and do the math. There's a calculator. If you go to goiguide.com, hover your mouse over photographer, and then go down to processing, there's a button that says calculator. You can just input the square footage and it'll tell you what the fee is. It's
awesome. I think I have two last questions, and then I'll ask you if I've missed something.
Yeah, cool.
When I get an iGuide Radix, do I get the walk around experience?
You do. So think of it like a 3D tour, fully navigable. Here, actually, I'll show you. I'll share my screen. I probably did a terrible job.
Probably be easier. Yeah.
Let's go to iGuide Insurance and Restoration, and we'll go down to our demo Radix here. So you can look around and then click to move forward and to navigate visually. So that means, you click where you want to go. And I don't know if you guys can see this, but there's here, let me full screen it and you can see it better. Can you still see the tour?
Yes.
Okay. So I can click on the little dots and I can move forward. But one of the huge advantages of iGuide, something that differentiates it, is that it always has this map essentially on the left side. And what that's designed to do is give you a sense of the property, bird's eye view, if you will, right? It's like you're walking around and you're holding a map. You're at the mall and it's the "You Are Here" map.
Okay.
So I can navigate via the laser data in the Radix's case by just clicking on the dots. So that means that I have very quick access to any of the data I could ever possibly want, whether it's inside the property or outside the property.
Okay. All right, cool. That works. Let's finish up on gear. So it may not be obvious, but you were holding something up. What is it that I need in order to create an iGuide Radix?
So you would need an iGuide camera system, and that's at this point going to be this one, which is called a Planix. So this is a 360-degree camera on top of a core unit, as we call it, with a LiDAR scanner installed. And this is like we had already done a separate
So
get around, so you can watch that for more details.
So you need an iGuide Planix camera kit,
Correct.
a tripod, and really that's about it.
Well, you'll need a smart device, but you can use any one you want. You got a phone or a tablet.
So the cameras run with your either an Android or iOS smartphone or tablet. Okay,
great. It's not tied to any operating system or anything.
So
use whatever.
Again, I'd just like to refer our viewers that Chris and I did an entire show on the iGuide Planix camera kit, an introduction, a demonstration, frequently asked questions. If you just feel like I get it, where do I go to get the camera kit? Just go to goiguide.com and you'll see camera. And then there's 3 flavors of the camera, and it's you can just buy the camera and have it shipped.
Yep, you got it.
So we'll leave it there. Chris, before we say bye, anything else that we should cover about iGuide Radix?
Yeah, I'll bring it home. I'll summarize the whole thing. So iGuide Radix was designed specifically for the insurance, restoration, construction industries to be like the fastest and most cost-effective way to get, a loss, flood, fire, whatever, documented and into the hands of an estimator so that claims process can be fast. And that's what everybody wants, faster is better for everybody. It's better for the homeowner or the property owner. It's better for the adjuster. It's better for the person on site capturing the data. So everybody wins. And it was not meant to be, a way to 3D model a property or use it for marketing. Technically, you could do that, but what you'll notice is that the laser data, it looks like laser data. So it really was never intended to be used, for example, real estate listings. This was very specific, created to document things like fire and flood loss. And I think it is the fastest. I know it's the fastest way to do that. There is nothing faster than this.
Awesome. Chris, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We've been visiting with Chris White. Chris is marketing manager for Planitar Inc., the makers of the iGuide Planix camera kit and the service iGuide. For Chris, his company Planitar is in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. And I'm Dan Smigrod in Atlanta, and you've been watching WGAN TV live at 5.